Hello and welcome to Ready Steady DIY. Today in this episode we're going to go over the DWS713 10-inch single bevel compound miter saw from DeWalt. I'm going to take it out of the box, I'm going to assemble it, I'm going to check it for square, and then I'm going to change the blade and cut some aluminum with it. It's a lot to do, so I better get going. The DWS713 miter saw from DeWalt has a 120 volt motor and draws 15 amps. It spins at 5,000 RPM and it can miter 50 degrees right and left. It bevels from 0 to 48 degrees to the left and 0 to 3 degrees to the right. It weighs 31 pounds, has a height of 13.75 inches, and a width of 20 inches. It has a 3-year limited warranty, a 1-year free service warranty, and a 90-day money-back guarantee from DeWalt. And a word of the wise here, miter saws are dangerous, so when you're using one, you should always have eye protection, you should have ear protection, should probably be wearing a mask if you're worried about dust, and most importantly, you should be careful that the material you're cutting doesn't kick back and hit you. The blade spins at 5,000 RPMs. It can launch something pretty quick. So opening the box, you'll see the miter saw itself. You'll see a 10-inch blade is included. You'll find 1 blade wrench, 1 dust bag, 1 miter lock knob, 1 vertical material clamp, and 1 instruction manual. You should read that. Once you put the saw on a flat, stable surface, the next step is to release the arm. You press down gently on the operating handle and then pull the headlock knob and rotate it a quarter turn. So once the arm was unlocked, I was able to remove the protective packing foam and attach the accessories. I screwed on the miter lock knob, I attached the dust bag, I made sure the vertical material clamp worked, and I read the instruction manual. For bench mounting, there are holes provided in all 4 feet. According to the instructions, they take an M8 or 5/16 inch bolt or smaller. One trick people use is to bolt the saw to a piece of plywood and then clamp that to the table. If you do that, make sure the bolts don't poke through the bottom and make it unstable. I knew I was going to change the blade pretty much right away, but I wanted to check the blade that was installed just to make sure everything was square. Lining up a miter saw might seem really complicated, but in essence, it's quite simple. What you want to make sure of is basically when the saw says it's cutting at 90 degrees, that it's actually cutting at 90 degrees. When the saw says it's cutting at 45 degrees, it's actually cutting at 45 degrees. There's a few things you can loosen, adjust, and then retighten, and that's sort of it. First thing I did was make sure the table was level and flat. There were no gaps in there. Same thing with the fence. If the table or the fence were not flat, I probably would have just taken it back to the store. Those can be fixed at a machine shop, but that's a little complicated. Next, I used a speed square and checked the fence relationship to the blade and found that it was exactly 90 degrees. Next, I checked the relationship between the blade and the table and found that to be 90 degrees as well. Right out of the box, I was getting pretty lucky here. Finally, before I moved on, I wanted to check the bevel. There's 2 bolts at the back of the saw. Basically, you just back them in and out to adjust the 90 degree position or the 45 degree position. My 45 was a smidge out. I applied a wrench, turned it a little bit, put it in the right spot, and it fell into 45 degrees perfectly. With the exception of the bevel, this saw was actually pretty accurate right out of the box. I did a quick test cut just to make sure. Cut a piece of wood that has a fair bit of size and width to it, take one of the pieces, flip it around, put them back together. If your cut was not exactly at 90 degrees, you're doubling the variance and you'll see it. In this case, these pieces of wood fell together pretty well. The project I've got coming up doesn't require super accurate cuts. I just wanted to make sure things were square. They seem to be. You can spend a lot of time making sure your miter saw is square. In my case, I don't think I'm going to go any further. So after my quick check, I had to put on the new blade. The new blade is a non-ferrous metal blade. That means it's appropriate for cutting aluminum. The wood blade that came with the saw had 32 teeth. The metal blade had 100 teeth. Make sure the saw's unplugged, of course. You raise the arm to the upper position, and you raise the guard as far as it'll go. The next step, according to the instructions, was to loosen but not remove the guard bracket screw. It's a little tricky. You just loosen it enough so that the bracket can be raised high enough that you can access the blade screw in the middle of the blade. Next, I push down on the spindle lock. Holding that button down, I use the wrench to remove the screw holding the blade to the saw. I remove the screw, I remove the outer blade clamp, and the blade. I left the inner blade clamp there because obviously I'm putting on a new blade. I put the new blade on, making sure that the teeth at the bottom of the blade were pointing towards the back of the saw. I put the outer blade clamp back on and installed the blade screw. Then I returned the guard bracket to its original position, and I tightened the guard bracket screw. Everything was back in place. I brought out a piece of pipe for a test cut. I made sure to clamp it at both sides to the fence. Then I pulled the trigger, bringing the saw to full speed, and I slowly let the saw plunge down through the aluminum. Some people like to use a lubricant on their blade. In this case, I didn't. It cut perfectly. So in the end, am I happy with my purchase? Yes, actually. The DWS713 came out of the box almost perfect. Having the saw come out of the box this square was a real convenience. If you've ever walked into a big box store and looked at miter saws, you'll know they come in quite a small size, usually 7¼ inches, a medium size, which is around 10 inches, and a 12-inch size. A 12-inch sliding compound miter saw, which has double bevel capabilities, is a really capable saw, but it's also huge. What I needed more was a saw I could store between jobs. If you see my table saw video, you'll know that storing a tool is just as important as using it for me. I don't use my power tools every day. I need them to be there, but when I'm done with them, I need them to store away. This smaller 10-inch miter saw, while it cut everything I needed it to, it also stores away perfectly when I'm done. And it's light enough that I can take it out of the basement and then return it to the basement at the end of the day easily. In the end, the DWS713 did all of those things, and I'm really glad I bought it. This thing's great. Oh yeah, and I'm sure some of you are wondering, why did I use a miter saw to cut a piece of pipe when a pipe cutter could have done it safer and with less mess? The answer to that is in an upcoming video. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. I hope this helped you out. Please like and subscribe, but hey, even if you don't, leave a comment in the comment section below. Comments help me make the channel better, and that's what I want.